Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today we're going to discuss how to get multiple subjects in focus. So, like I've just said, we're going to get multiple subjects in focus today. We are going to be going out and shooting, so don't have a panic. But there's just some theory things that I want to cover off before we go outside. So, we're going to illustrate that in here. We're going to discuss today specifically getting multiple subjects in focus in the same image, the exact same photograph. So, we're not talking about compositing, although that would be plan B if plan A does not work. So, we're going to discuss all the important parts to getting multiple subjects in focus, and this is a really useful for when you're photographing animals with their owners, when you're photographing multiple animals, when you're photographing a group situations, all those kind of things come down to this. So we're going to discuss that starting now. By the way, if you haven't already, please do press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. I haven't asked you to do that in a little while, so I would really appreciate it. If you haven't already, you definitely need to understand the exposure triangle because we're going to be discussing something specifically relating to aperture, and you're going to need to know how to compensate for that everywhere else. You guys that know me, you know I like shooting wide open or close to wide open to get all of that blurry background-ness in the image. You can still do that and get multiple dogs in the shot, and this is what I kind of want to discuss. So for the purposes of today's video, we're going to be using a 70-200 2.8 Sony GM lens with the Sony a7R III. So we are going to be using that equipment, but it doesn't really matter. You can kind of use whatever you want to use, but there is a difference in terms of the focal length and how much of the image is in focus, which we've discussed already in the How to Get Blurry Backgrounds video. So I want to discuss with you guys, like, obviously I'm hoping that you understand the principles of aperture in terms of the F number. The bigger the F number is, the more of the image is in focus. That is true. So you can logically use your brain to go, okay, I'll just increase my F number to get everything in focus. And yes, that will help you out, but you do also need to understand the implications of relative distances in that as well. I'm keeping this video as short as possible because I don't think it needs to be ridiculously long. It's a relatively straightforward thing, so I'm going to illustrate the next part with some props. I've got two candles here because I just think, it's easy to explain, so just stick with me. Please stick with me. This is going to enrich your life, I promise. So what we've got is two candles, right? If we put those two candles next to each other, slap bang straight in a line, like so, we only need to focus on one of them to achieve a good overall focus on the image, right? What if those two are staggered apart? So let's put them, I don't know, there. What would you do then? Because now we've got an issue because they're on different focal planes. If you focus on the one in front, then you will end up having the focus on that subject, that candle, and not on the back one. So the first thing to note about this is try and get your subject as close physically possible to being on the same line, right? So if we've got our subjects on the same line, it's okay. Now, one thing that's important to note about the depth of field is that it actually works just like most things in photography in thirds. So if you focused on something, let's say we focused on the front of this subject here. If we focused on here, then what that does for us basically is it gives us a third of the depth of field in front and 2/3 of the depth of field behind. We don't really care about the depth of field going on in front there, and it's not going to be potentially super sharp, but the knowledge that we know about the depth of field behind does come in handy. So let's say, for example, that our subjects are sat reasonably close together. They've done a good job. We've been positioned nicely, but we do definitely have one that is in front of the other one. So one is slightly in front. And that's as much as it needs to be to drop the other one completely out of focus at 2.8, for example, when you're shooting in a situation. So what you do is you focus on the front subject, the subject that is most at the front. Focus on them first. And if you focus on them, you've got your 2/3 of the depth of field falling behind. But what is your aperture? What is the depth of field? Well, we know from previous videos that the depth of field is manipulated by how close you are, the camera is, to the subject. So the further the subject is away from the camera lens, the larger the depth of field that's going to come across there. So Using that knowledge, we can kind of help ourselves out a little bit in terms of how and where we're going to shoot these things. Now, another thing that does come into consideration here is definitely going to be your focal length. So a longer focal length like 200mm compresses everything in the scene, and that includes the depth of field. So just bear that in mind, but don't worry about that too much. If you get your subjects to be nicely lined up, reasonably close together in the scene, you can then go ahead and focus on the closest subject, eyes, remember the eyes, and you have got a good chance of throwing that focus back onto the second subject. But there's a handy little trick which can help. Set your aperture at how many subjects there are in the scene times 2. So as a rough guesstimation, we've got 2 subjects here. If we were to go ahead and shoot them, let's say that they're reasonably well lined up there, we could go for f4 and give it a whirl and see what we get. There's loads of things that come into consideration here, but that's the basics. What if our subjects are staggered a little bit more than we particularly maybe would have liked? We want to go ahead and add another one on again. So either f6 in that case or f8 for these 2 subjects. But then how do you keep your blurry backgrounds? Well, that comes down to your distances. So make sure that there is enough distance between your subjects and the background, and make sure that the distance between you and the subject is less than that distance. This is something that you're gonna have to learn to use your kit, but what we've done is we've gone out and shot using this principle, so I'll just drop that clip in here now. Right, so we've got a much straighter, long track this way. So B is in front by a little bit, which is fine, so we focus on the front dog. The front dog is Barnacle. Right, sorry. So we can look really quickly at the images taken from that just to kind of show you guys. Let's go ahead and zoom into 200% here. We have focused Barnacle, Bryt, baby B was slightly in front of Alf. In this situation, she's mid-flick of a head around here, but we've got all of her head in focus and all of his head in a nice sharp focus, and that was shot at f4.5 at nearly 200mm, so that gives you kind of like a good range there. Here we've got a beautiful pose from Alf. This is obviously how he feels about being sat next to that dog, and we're at f4.5, and let's see again. So we've got nice sharp focus across the board. Which, even with these examples that we're showing you, just raw files from the 2 of those 2 set together, loads of those images are in focus using the f number times 2 for the subject and using the moving them close together where possible. Let's say, for example, you can't get them to sit close together because they hate each other or they're just annoying or they can't do it, and even leads won't work. What do you do then? Well, in that situation, you photograph one there, you photograph the other one there, you composite them together, or when they're sat side by side, you move your focus point whilst they're still in position from one to the other, so you've got a sharp image of both of them, you put them together. That's how you photograph 2 subjects or more in a scene and making sure they're in focus in one shot. I hope this was helpful. If it is, please let me know, and let me know what you think basically about anything else in the comments below. I'll see you all again really, really soon.